Alright, hello and welcome. So, if this is your first time in one of these review videos, I've gone over all of the rules for my weapon reviews in this video, right there. That is my primary weapon review. All of the same basic rules still apply, and the labeling system is also going to be the same. So, with that said, go watch that if you want to see the rules and such, and I will be going over the weapons now. So, there is a few things about secondaries that are good to point out, and that is that being a primary or a secondary doesn't necessarily mean that like primaries are always going to be better than secondaries. There are a lot of secondaries that are some of like the key best weapons in the game, and primaries like can also be some of the best weapons in the game. It really just depends on what slot they go in, and there are a lot of secondaries that are better than a lot of primaries. Just wanted to kind of top that off by saying that. None of like, don't immediately assume that say the Vectis is better than the Lex or something like that, because it's a little more specific than that. So, that being said, let's get started. So the first weapon we got is the Acrid. This weapon used to be really good in Damage 1.0, but I feel like it's fallen off significantly. It has some niche uses, but nothing that's really gonna make it widely used at endgame. Just kind of a normal gun, nothing too special. We have the Afuris. Don't use these. Even if you're like a starting out player, these are not worth getting. They don't do damage. They don't really do much of anything, honestly. Bolto. If you like how these weapons fire, they might be worth getting, but their build requirements are pretty hefty for what you're getting out of it. And if you want to use the Bolto, you should probably use the Syndicate variant of them. But if you really like them, then there might be worth building for you in the mid-game. That's the Bolto again. Akbronco. So, this is where I'm going to say everything I need to say about all of the Broncos. Don't use any of them. They're all awful. All of them are not worth what they are built out of. They all suck. Every single Bronco is terrible. There's another handheld shotgun that if you want a handheld shotgun, you should be shooting for. And we'll talk about that when we get to it. Don't use any of the Broncos. The Akjagara. These weapons are surprisingly good. I would consider these endgame viable just because I've used them there. They do, like, they proc slash all the time. You can actually get a lot of damage out of these weapons, and they might be a little on the hard to control side, but especially if you're like a Necros main or something like that. These weapons do a lot of damage. Their build requirements are a little hefty, but I think you could. These are definitely endgame viable weapons that you could bring and have a good time with. They're kind of barely making it into that category, though, and don't stand up to some of the other weapons in the endgame because some of the other endgame weapons are kind of ridiculous. But if you like them, like I do, totally usable, 100%. The Aklato, these are Mastery. These have Mastery in them. You should get the Mastery out of these weapons and then trash them. Yep. The Aklex. So, we haven't talked about the Lex yet. This is one of, along with the regular Lex, this is an early game weapon, because this weapon is just built out of credits. Like, if you have the credits for it, and credits are really easy to get, this weapon is just, like, great. They're fantastic. You're doubling up on the regular Lex, which is already an amazing, amazing weapon. And there's no downside. These weapons could, like, no problem carry you through the entire star chart, and they're just great. Like, having two, what are, like, essentially Desert Eagles is a really good thing, as you might imagine. And they're great. Perfect early game weapon. Akmagnus, surprisingly, I don't use these a whole lot, but these are endgame weapons. They have a lot going for them because they are status and critical chance weapons, so provided you are good at getting headshots, these weapons modded correctly can do a lot for you, and got a lot better whenever the primed critical mods for secondaries came in. So with those, these are totally usable at endgame. Like, you can just get tons of procs, do tons of critical headshot damage, and actually kind of melt people with these weapons. Which is kind of unexpected because prior to those mods coming out, I wouldn't have really given them a lot of credit, other than just being status cannons, but with those mods, they're great. I actually like them a whole lot. Surprisingly good. So, doubling down on the critical factor, though, these are the Aksomati. So, these are the little sister of the Soma. And they are, like, they're the little sister of the Soma. They're endgame viable. They may need a few Forma, because they don't come with any slots. Maybe they come with 1v polarity. Regardless, they do need Forma. But these weapons hit really hard, especially like if you can get in someone's face and get all the headshots on them, they're not going to have a good time. They're going to get evaporated, essentially, and it's going to be real good for you. Build requirements, a little hefty, but one of the build requirements for this weapon is also a good weapon, which we're about to talk about, and that is the Akstilettos. So, at about the time you're able to get these, which is like you've joined a clan, and it's like, oh, well, what's in this clan? You should probably build these. The Akstiletto are actually really good secondaries in the mid-game, and they just perform well. They have like a decent amount of things going for them. They're not terribly ammo inefficient, and they're just solid machine guns for the mid-game. I used them pretty extensively when they came out, just because they're also pretty fun. The Akvasto, so these are your gunslinger weapons. If you like having dual revolvers, then guess what? You're going to use these no matter what. They're actually not that bad. Mid-game, they're like pretty good, mostly against Infested. They're more fun than anything else, I'd say. Definitely a usable weapon in the mid-game, and if you really went for it, I'd say you could get away with these in the end-game as well, as long as you have a good primary to back them up. The Akzani. So for me personally, I can't wait for the Akzani Prime, because I think they're going to be really good. This weapon just, you put out a fuckload of bullets. That's what the Akzani are for, and in the mid-game area, like, it's very easy just to annihilate, like, a whole wave of enemies. But you absolutely have to have pistol ammo mutation or a shitload of ammo packs to drop, or else you're going to have a real bad time with these, and they're going to run out instantaneously, because they do not fuck around when it comes to using ammo. The Angstrum. So this weapon is pretty close to being on my endgame list. It's just the usability isn't really there where you kind of need where you need it. If you pair this with a weapon like, say, like just a really reliable weapon, like I guess like Vaykor Prime or Vasto Prime, that's just like a reliable like general combat thing, you could probably use this as like a big AoE clear if your frame needs it or something like that. But I don't think that for most frames or setups that it's going to be incredibly viable in the endgame. But it is an okay weapon, also dangerous to yourself, which knocks it a little bit. Still not bad though, and decent for what you build it with. The Atomos. So, thank you for Anonymio for just telling me that I should form the shit out of this weapon and use it a bunch. And also for making sure that I realize that Ruinous Extension affects both parts of this weapon's function. So, basically, the Atomos, whenever you equip Ruinous Extension, you get the extended beam to an enemy, and it also extends the length that it will chain between enemies, which means that this can clear the fuck out of rooms if you forma it and give it the damage it needs and wants. It has surprised me how much better this weapon is with Ruinous Extension, and I would argue that if you're not using Ruinous Extension, this weapon becomes significantly worse. But with Ruinous Extension, totally like usable at the end game. Like you just burn it down. Even a gimmicky build with Ember actually works with this weapon, which is just shocking, honestly. Yeah, surprisingly good, and it's just AoE death in most cases. It doesn't scale as hard as some of the weapons, but for the general endgame that you would normally be playing, it's a great weapon. So, the Ballistica. This weapon is not great. The reason that I would say for anyone to build this weapon would be if you want to see if you like the Ballistica, because the upgraded version, the Syndicate variant of this weapon, is very good. So, build this weapon if you want to see if you like how it fires, because it and the Rakta act the same way. That's kind of the only reason you should build this weapon, is to see if you enjoy the type of weapon that it is. The red single Bolto, I mean, you would build this going up to the Bolto, but single pistols are not normally very good. This one is just bleh. The Bolto is clearly better. The Brakk. So, this is the shotgun I was talking about. If you want to use a shotgun as your secondary at endgame, the Brakk is what you need to go for. The Detron is just slightly worse than this, I'd say. But the Brakk is a wonderful, wonderful weapon. You can burst down enemies very well with it, and it will serve your function of being a pocket shotgun very well. It is a little hard to get, but with LOR being there, you can farm the Grust pretty easily and get it relatively quickly. So yeah, it's a really good weapon. I like it a lot. It's probably the only secondary shotgun I've ever like actually used. That's another Bronco. Don't use those. The Castanas. So this weapon variant is really awkward and not good, kind of in general. But if you want to use any variant of this weapon type, which I will point out when they are there, use the Sancti Castanas because they are the best of the set. There's not really a huge reason to use these regular Castanas unless you really like their gimmick. And if you like their gimmick, you're probably going to like the weapon. And if you don't like their gimmick, you're going to hate this weapon. And that's kind of how it goes. The Cestra. This weapon does basically no damage for a really bad ammo economy. And all of the Cestras never really fix that. Even the Sekiri? I don't know what it is. We'll get to it in a second. Even the Cestra, they're mostly there just for their Syndicate proc, and even that's not very strong. I don't like any of the Cestra variants. They are fun because they put out like a bunch of shots and it's a big light show, but beyond that, they're not really good. The Despairs. So, maybe a little controversial. The Despairs just barely get like chunked out of endgame because they don't have like the speed that is needed, and the way that they have travel time is a little awkward in the endgame, and they don't gain as much as some other thrown weapons do from some of the special mods that thrown weapons get in the secondary category. So I don't think they're endgame viable, but if you get these weapons, know that they are still very good, and if you like them, you can definitely make them work. I just think that they're maybe a little weak for what you want to be using at the endgame. Moving on is the Detron. So if you don't have the Brakk, the Detron is a perfectly acceptable alternative. That is kind of the whole of it. It's an acceptable weapon to use, but it's just not as good as the Brakk, in my opinion, and that kind of nudges it out of the endgame category. But it's good. It's an okay gun. Moving on, we have the Dex Fury. So these are an anniversary weapon, which is coming up pretty soon. They're fine. They're mid. They're not gonna like take you too far or anything, but I mean, they exist. They're fine. I like how they look, so they've got that going for them. Other than that, they're just kind of regular guns that are pretty good. If you're coming to the game now and you're like gonna get these weapons, you'll probably use them pretty extensively in the beginning, and then kind of drop them off at some point and just keep them around as like a collector's item. Pretty fun though. Dual Cestra, as I said before, Cestras are not very good. The Embolist. The Embolist is interesting, but for the range that it's at, you definitely want the Brakk or the Detron over the Embolist, I'd say. It is a little special and niche in that it's all toxin damage, so you could kind of double down on that and go through shields and do some niche uses that way. In the same way, let me see what it's called. I always forget. Same way the Acrid kind of works. But it's not as ranged as the Acrid, so it's not as versatile, but it does more damage, and there's not a lot going for this weapon, in my opinion. Fun fact about the Embolist, though, if a Mesa is using her 3, the Embolist can kill her. Yep, you can just kill Mesas using the Embolist, if they're using their 3. Don't know why that hasn't been fixed yet, but yeah, that is a thing that exists. The Furis. So, there's actually a special consideration for the single regular Furis, and that is that there is a Syndicate mod that gives this weapon lifesteal. So if you need a way to heal, that's actually a totally viable thing to bring if you want to heal. So that's the use for the regular Furis. It's kind of surprising that a weapon that is this otherwise like just awful thing that you would never want to use is actually totally acceptable. Like, because you have lifesteal. Lifesteal makes things pretty immediately good. Moving on, we've got the regular Gammacor. So this is another one of those weapons like the regular Ballistica, where I would say only build this if you want the mastery. Obviously, that goes for everything. Or if you want to see if you will like the Synoid variant of this weapon, because the Synoid variant is very good, but this weapon is just mediocre. Maybe a little below mediocre even. It's okay, and it's a good weapon to test out and see if you will like the Synoid Gammacor. The Hikou, regular Hikou. These are pretty easy to build, and you could build them in the like early mid game, but nothing to write home about, nothing too special. We will talk about the other variant of these right now. So Hikou Prime, these are my go-to thrown weapons because you can throw so many of them so fast and fill an area with explosions with the mod that makes your thrown weapons detonate 80% of the time, which 80% of the time when you're throwing this many means that you're just throwing explosions, essentially. You can, like, push out an actual, like, very large amount of, like, crowd control death. Well, not so much crowd control. Kind of. AoE death, we'll go with that. So for that kind of stuff, these weapons shine pretty highly. I'd say that maybe the Atomos is better at what I would usually use these weapons for, but I only recently discovered that, and these weapons are a great alternative if you have that specific mod that makes them throw, and like whenever you throw them, they explode. That kind of seals the deal for these weapons, and otherwise they would not be endgame, I think. Next we have the Kohmak. So, I will honestly say I have not used the Kohmak very much. I have used it very little. I have not been impressed with any time that I've used it. Like, I modded it a couple of different ways, and it's never performed well for me, and I don't know if it's me not liking like the way it fires or something else. Maybe if you like the Kohmak, I've heard some people like praise the Kohmak for being a good gun. If you've got a good build for this gun, let me know, and I'll probably make a why would you use on that and go over it more in depth. Because I would like to know why those few people seem to really hook on and like the Kohmak. But otherwise, for me personally, in my experience, it has not been a great gun, and I would usually choose other weapons over it, specifically the Brakk, because it is a shotgun-style weapon. Yeah, it's just I haven't found whatever the thing is that some people like about this gun. The Kraken. So, in the early game, this weapon is fine, but its build requirements are a little hefty for what you get out of it. Honestly, if you're going to use this weapon, probably just go for the Lex instead. But it's okay. The Cold Star. The Kraken is a part of this wait. I'm pretty sure the Kraken is a part of this weapon. So this weapon is getting barely edged out of the endgame because I think that its firing action is a little too awkward to be consistent when you like kind of need it to be. And getting shots to go where I want them to is like more difficult than like you're getting from it. Like the damage you get out of this weapon is pretty significant for a while, then it falls off really hard whenever you need to place like multiple shots in specific areas of a group to get like the full damage out of it. It's fine, but its ability to kill you super hard I think knocks too many points off of it because it can kill you in a very wide area also. It's a fine gun, and I'm sure if you put like any form on this weapon, probably in the endgame area. Yeah, you have to like it, though. You have to like it, and for me personally, I just don't like it very much. But it's still a fine weapon. Totally fine. If you like the explosive nature of it, you're going to have a good time with it. The regular kunai. So you can get these in the early game if you like the kunai. They're not going to last too much longer than that. They're gonna be not great very, very quickly. The Lotto. This weapon is bad enough that whenever they introduced the Mark 1 weapons, this did not get a Mark 1 variant. So it's a starter weapon that you should get rid of immediately, as soon as possible. And you should get rid of it for the Lex. The Lex is the best starter weapon by like a huge margin, I'd say. Yeah, by an incredible margin. This is the gun. Like, start the game up, play the tutorial, get some credits, buy a Lex. That is the beginning of the game, I think, for anyone who wants to have like a good sidearm. Like, you will buy a Lex. The Lex performs amazing. Like, amazing in the early game. And then, obviously, upgrading this into the Aklex is, like, purely better. And that will take you all the way through the entire star chart. And then, after all of that, you'll go farm the Lex Prime with the Aklex. And then you'll have the Lex Prime. This is the best secondary weapon in the entire game, in my opinion. Its damage with those Prime mods that came out, those critical Prime mods, is absolutely jaw-dropping. This weapon cleans fucking house. You can solve all the problems with this gun. And if we ever get Lex Prime, that'll be the new best gun, because it's insanely good. And you might be wondering, well, what made this suddenly better than the Vaykor Marelok, which was my old personal absolute best gun in the game? Well, what made it better is a buff. Since that last video, the Lex Prime got buffed, and those Prime mods got released, which jumped the Lex Prime significantly forward, like hugely forward, into being the best secondary in the game. And that's not to say the Vaykor Marelok is bad now, but if you put the Forma in, if you get the Prime mods, it's the best secondary, I think, hands down. No problem. And obviously that's a little preference, but like the ease of use, the insane damage, like all of it comes together. Like this, even the status on this gun is good. Like there's nothing bad about this gun in like any way, and it's just a wonderful sidearm that I love. Might have noticed a trend there with all of the Lexes. The regular Magnus, I don't think this is really worth using as a single, honestly. If you're gonna use the Magnus, like build this and level it for the mastery, and then turn it into the Akmagnus. Honestly, that's what you should do. No real reason to have it as a singular. The Mara Detron, this is mastery, but I mean, on a technicality, I mean, it is better than the regular Detron, but it's mastery, basically. So if you like the Detron, then I mean, you use the Mara Detron over it, but I still don't think even the Mara Detron beats the Brakk out, so there it is. Marelok. So, once you get to the mastery rank where you can use the Marelok, you should immediately get it. If you deduce that the time between you getting the Aklex and Lex Prime is too much, you should get a Marelok, because that will fill that gap out real good, like great. The regular Marelok is a wonderful, wonderful gun that does a lot of damage, and it's just a great gun. It functions much in the same way that the Lex does, but it's faster fire rate, higher status, that kind of stuff. Push it above the Lex in usefulness, but you have to wait to get this gun, so obviously it's not an early game weapon. In the mid game, this is a weapon that I'd say you absolutely should build and have, because it's just a good gun. Just great. Mark 1 Furis, Mark 1 starter weapon. Mark 1 starter weapon, Kunai again. The Nucor. So, the Nucor is fine. It's like the Atomos, only without the thing that makes the Atomos amazing. Like, it's a fine gun, and it's fun to use. I'll definitely give it that. It's a great, like, the visual effects and all that stuff are just super fun. But it's just, there's nothing really there that's pushing it to the end game, unless you really drive it home with Forma. Otherwise, there's not a whole lot going for this gun. It's just fine. Just a fine thing. It's good status cannon if you need that. Other than that, not great. The Piranha. So there's actually a really weird thing about this gun that I have to say, and that's that it's good in PvP. So it's one of the shotgun, like, secondaries. And I'd say you could probably use this over the Brakk if you like it, and if you are going for headshots with your secondary shotgun. Just because of the critical stats of this weapon, you probably use the Prime Critical mods. And it's a good weapon for that. But the place where I've gotten the most use out of the Piranha has been PvP, so I guess if you're into that, use it there. But otherwise, it's a mid-game weapon that I think you could definitely push to endgame with some Forma and those Prime mods pretty easily. In fact, with the Forma and Prime mods, it might surpass the Brakk even. Rakta Ballistica. So, this weapon's endgame viable. I personally don't like how it fires. If you watch my Why Would You Use on it, you know that. But if you like how this weapon fires, can't argue with the stats. And the Syndicate proc and all that stuff come together to make this just a good weapon. Like, statistically, it's great. I just don't like how it fires. If you like how it fires, it's a fucking great gun. This gun's perfect. Like, it's just a great firearm that you should use. And I can't really say anything else about it. It's just a fine gun. Definitely needed that buff it got. Sancti Castanas, everything I said about the Castanas before still applies. I think the weapon type is bad, but these are the best of that weapon type. and they're perfectly usable if you like their gimmick. Sekira Dual Cestra. So these weapons are, sadly, I think, only close to being endgame viable. They're just... like, Perrin's Syndicate proc is the worst one, and they're just not very good. These weapons, they're just not very good. Just, I wish they were better, because I like the visuals you get and everything with those weapons, but they're just blah. They're just blah. The Seer. So, instead of getting a Seer, unless you want the Mastery, you should buy a Lex. Because you get this from Vor on Mercury. You should get a Lex instead. This weapon is just... it's basically just worse than the Lex. Yeah, it's basically just worse than the Lex. It looks cool, I'll give it that. But other than that, it is just a worse Lex that you kind of have to do a lot more work to get. Cool looking, though. Maybe if we get some other variant of the Seer, it'll be good. Who knows? The Sycoris. So I'm just gonna say everything I need to say about Sycoris right here. Don't use fucking any of the Sycoris variants. They suck. All of them are terrible. If you could fucking, like, quintuple wield these weapons, they would still be bad. And that says a lot. All of the Sycoris Prime. Sycoris Prime is the only Prime that I have sold. It's the only one. It's the only Prime I've ever sold. Because it's that shitty. It is that shitty and awful. Don't use any Sycoris. Like, if you're going for high mastery, build it last. Just put it on, like, the bottom of the list. Be like, I guess I have to do it. I guess. Like, as much as I want there to be a good secondary burst fire gun, fuck, dude. Oh, man. Well, I know, I mean, technically, I guess that the Rakta Ballistica is that. Don't use the Sycoris. It's fucking garbage. It's actual, factual garbage. On the entire flip side of that, we have the Sonicor. So, the Sonicor has something that I don't think any other secondary has. And that is the ability to completely take control of a crowd and just wipe them out. Like, enemies, they essentially can't even fight back against a Sonicor. Like, you just shoot it into a crowd, and everyone either flies to the moon or dies. It does so much damage. Like, it does more damage than it's saying here. It does actually have a status chance, and, like, these stats are just straight up lying, essentially. Because it's an amazing gun. Like, if this gun had arms and legs, it could run Draco by itself. It would just go to Draco for me and be like, I'll be back with some, like, focus, man, I'll see you in a little bit. Like, this weapon's absurd. It's insane. Like, just build it as soon as you can. Like, its build requirements are, like, mid-ish. Like, getting to the end of the star chart where, like, it's like, I'm going to the Void all the time to get Argon Crystals and shit for weapons that I need. Build the Sonicor. Do it. Build the thing. Build and do the thing. This weapon's insane. Like, it's not only good, it's also just a fucking, like, fun gun. Like, sending people to the fucking stars with, like, a fucking, like, crazy wave cannon, like, Mega Man Buster type, like, bullshit. Like, this weapon's fucking awesome. I can't say enough good things about the Sonicor. This weapon is, like, pure joy. It's just fucking, like, it's just fun. It's just a fun gun. It's so fun and good. On the other hand, can't say the same about the Spectra. Spectra's bad. It's just a bad gun. It's just a bad gun. It's actually, like, I don't know. I actually can't think of any redeeming qualities. I mean, for status, you would use the new core over this, like, pretty much 100% of the time. Yeah, no real redeeming qualities there. The Spira. So, for me, personally, if I was going to choose a secondary throwing weapon to use that was not the Hikou to specifically utilize the explosives, I would use the Spira. I don't think that they are too amazing, but they do have really nice stats, and they do a really nice amount of damage. Obviously, their firing style gets a little taking used to, and their fire rate is not amazing or anything, so you are going to have to get used to that. And getting the headshots that you want with this weapon can be challenging, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. They're good, but their style holds them back, I think. If you get used to that weapon, I think endgame is where that weapon goes. So, mid-game. This is a mid-game weapon right here. Well, you could use it at endgame. You'll need Forma, probably. But in the mid-game, this weapon's real good. Like, you could, like, it just, like, lock down choke points, just put explosive goo everywhere, everybody dies and blows up. It's great for that, and it's a good amount of fun. If we get a special variant of the Stug, I'd say a special variant of this weapon would most likely be endgame viable, and that says a lot about how good the Stug is regularly. It's just fine. It's just a fine gun. It's a lot of fun to use. I'd definitely suggest people build it and try it out. It's a lot of fun, mostly. Synoid Gammacor. So, this weapon has a very unique bonus that kind of goes along with it already being pretty good. So, just outright, it's a good gun for shooting and killing enemies. It's just a wave laser, essentially. Well, not a wave laser. It's a laser that you would, like, shoot in a wave pattern back and forth like this. And it would just, like, you just wipe out any, like, low enemies, and you can hold it on stronger enemies and just murder them super hard that way. But beyond that, if you need a secondary that can just fuel you up with energy, Synoid Gammacor has got you fucking covered. This weapon will generate tons of energy for you, while also being a pretty good sidearm, and that makes it amazing. It's just a solid gun. Just a solid gun, especially if you like the regular Gammacor. If you built it earlier, Synoid Gammacor is just gonna be your fucking... It's the bee's knees for you if you really like the regular Gammacor. Just fantastic. Fantastic gun. Talons. So, these are the same weapon type as the Sancti Castanas, and the Sancti Castanas are definitely better. Yep. Yes. Yep, there it is. Yep, that's pretty much all I got there. Telos Akbolto. I'd say this is definitely a personal choice, and it's not my personal choice. If you like the way these weapons act and fire, you're probably going to really love them. For me personally, I don't think that the way they act and fire is any good in the late game. They're significantly better with, like, a firing macro, I'll give you that. But just, they're not great. Like, if I was going to use a weapon in this style, I think the Akjagara are what I'm going to go for pretty much every time. Like, the Syndicate proc is okay, but it's not enough to push it into the endgame edge. Grakata. So, these weapons are just a lot of fun. Like, they're, like, stupid and gimmicky, and it's DE, like, doubling down on some, like, stupid meme bullshit, but they're actually not even that bad. Like, their ammo economy is fucking terrible and everything, but they're just fun. They're just a fun gun to use. Like, I'm tempted to say these are endgame just for fun, but they're really not. There are definitely better weapons that you could be using, specifically the Aksomati. But this is a for fun thing that they fucking put in the game for fun, and because Grakata. Like, that's the reasoning, I think. This is a lot of fun to use. Obviously, it's a primary that you're using two of, so not much else but fun. So, Twin Gremlin. If you get lucky and get the blueprint from these, from the boss fight, you should build them in the mid-game. They're fine guns. I had a lot of fun with them, using them. They're just a lot of fun. They're just like little nail gun things, and they're for fun in the mid-game. I don't think these get pushed to the late game, but they're pretty versatile. They have, like, even split of damage, and they're just okay. Just normal and okay. If we were to get, like, a special variant of them, I could see them being pretty good. Or, like, a really good, like, Syndicate mod or something, I could see them being really good. But as it stands, nah, not really. Twin Vipers. These weapons use way too much ammo for, like, nothing that you're getting out of it. Like, they use so much ammo. Like, even, like, a maxed out pistol ammo mutation, like, it's not going to keep you topped off, like, for very long, and, like, you reload constantly, and the reload is too long for how much you are reloading, honestly. And they're just, Even the special version of this has, like, the same problem, even though the special version is obviously very, like, much better. They're just not something you should be using. So the Tysis. So this is a status cannon that, if we ever get to the point where there's, like, red statuses, the Tysis will be an endgame weapon, probably. Whatever a red status is, it'll probably be hilariously good. So if we ever get to the point where that is a thing that exists, expect the Tysis to be, like, an endgame weapon. But for as long as 100% status is, like, our cap on status, this weapon will just be fine. It's corrosive innately, great for stripping armor if you have no other way to do so. It's better than the Unairu passive for stripping armor, because this actually stacks hilariously. Like, even if this is no mods, it's great for stripping armor. It's fine, but its use is too niche, and there are too many other ways around armor, I think, for this weapon to be at an endgame level. It does look really cool, though. I like how it looks, so I give it props where props are due. It looks cool. The Vasto. So, this is my only other early game weapon. You have the Aklex, the Lex, and the Vasto. And the Vasto is only an early game weapon I'm suggesting if you don't want to build a Lex. And that is because this is a fast-firing weapon. So let's say you're a person that picked the bow as your, like, starting out weapon. You picked the bow, you already have, like, a slow, relatively high damage weapon, so adding a Lex to your arsenal is maybe not the best thing for your, like, overall, like, kit of weapons. The Vasto can be built pretty damn early, and it's like a little fast-firing sidearm that's quite nice. So if you need that, Vasto's a pretty good one to build early, if your main weapon is going to be like a bow or something for quite a bit of the early mid-game, and that's the reason that I suggest it. The Lex is a better gun in the early game, but this fits that niche very well, so that's the reason to use it. The Vasto Prime, this is a style gun. I'd say this is definitely a style gun. The Lex Prime beats this in, like, every category, essentially. Yeah, pretty much. Stylistically, real damn cool. Very cool weapon. But the Lex Prime is what you would want in the single weapon category at the end there. So the Vaykor Marelok used to be the king of the secondaries. Now it's number 2, which, yeah, that's not that bad. This weapon has some things over the Lex Prime. The Lex Prime has, like, stats and power and all that shit over the Vaykor Marelok, but what the Vaykor Marelok does have is a really good Syndicate proc. So, if you need a secondary that can fucking heal you, granted not as well as, like, the Single Fury, but the Single Fury is also not a good gun, this is a super solid, great secondary that will heal you and do AoE damage. And it doesn't need Forma to be good. Like, you don't need Prime mods. Like, all that stuff is nice to be added in later, but it's just a solid, like, you get this and it is immediately a solid gun, and that's kind of what the Vaykor Marelok has over it. Like, if you're in the end game and you went Steel Meridian, there's no reason to not have this weapon and the Lex Prime. Like, having both is great because it gives you a lot of options. Like, because this is a lot faster firing and has, like, a bigger, like, magazine size, it's nice to have the versatility to be like, well, I want a little healing so that, like, maybe I don't need to get close with my melee weapon and life strike. Well, it's nice to have the Vaykor Marelok because it's like, well, I can top off my healing if I take some slash damage and do things like that. It's super versatile, still an amazing gun. Just doesn't quite measure up to the Lex. And then we have a single Viper. No. Then we have the Wraith Twin Vipers. The same thing I said about the other Twin Vipers. The ammo economy is insanely bad. And while these weapons do a lot of burst DPS, it's not, no, don't use it. Like, their burst DPS is actually less than the... I think their burst DPS might actually be less than, like, Vasto Prime? I think. With that critical chance... Yeah, there's just not much good about these weapons. Like, their ammo economy is so bad, and they reload so much, and bleh, they're just not great. Wow, okay, well, we're done. But yeah, that is all of the secondary weapons, and I hope you guys will join me again in a little while for the melee weapons, which I think I'm missing one still. I'm missing the Sidon. We already went over the Kazas, so I'll get the Sidon, mess around with that, and then get this stuff all done, and then we'll be back here for some more talks. So, I hope you guys liked the video, and I'm going to be working on the melee one, so I'll see you guys tomorrow.